Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. In Nigeria, the total value of capital importation into the country in the first quarter of 2019 soared by 216% to 8.48 billion, according to figures released by the National Bureau of Statistics.
Meanwhile, the largest amount of capital importation received was mainly through portfolio investment, and the United Kingdom led the list of sources of capital investment inflow, accounting for about 53.40% of the inflow in the first quarter of the year.
Analysts claim there's a need to encourage more foreign direct investment FDI in the country, as portfolio investments tend to be more volatile, leaving countries vulnerable.
Well, and from our studios in Abuja, the current lead consultant on private sector development to the ECOWAS Commission, co-chair of EU-Africa Business Task Force Summit Group, and a senior policy advisor to the President, Africa Business Roundtable, Professor Ken Ife, joins us now. Good morning, Professor. Thank you so much for joining us on the show at this time. Now, I'm sure you have seen that report by the NBS for quarter one. Should we roll out the drums, or is it too early to celebrate these cheerful figures, you would say?
It's good news, and we appreciate and value every bit of good news right now. I think 216% quarter-on-quarter increase is serious. But again, when you look at it in relation to year-on-year, is actually an increase of just over $2 billion. Even then, it's still good news. But there's more to learn to disaggregate the data and look at the breakdown of that capital importation, look at the sector-by-sector distribution, look at the source of the money, look at the channel, the banking sectors that are actually bringing this money through, and the destination of this investment. All of them give us a lot more information to digest.
Prof, is this good news? Professor, is this good news? Owing to the fact that with the size of this country, about 180 million people, we could only manage about 8.4 billion. Is this good news? Because a lot of watchers and industry experts will say the number could have been way more than this if we had not discovered crude oil and Dutch disease had not set in. So is this a pat on the back?
Well, what I would say to that is every good news is good news. Don't forget that we are just coming out of election. It could have been worse. If there was turbulence following the election, it could have been worse. And if you look at the one of last quarter, the quarter four, it was only $2.68 billion. But don't forget that this is not the only resource coming into Nigeria. Diaspora remittance is $23 billion. So there are more stuff coming into the country, but they are coming through different conduits. But the answer to your question is yes. We, as the largest economy in Africa, we actually deserve a lot more investment. And there are many sectors crying out. Look, agriculture only got $124 million, when we should have more than 10 times that figure. So we should work harder. There are also good news on the sense that there's work going on, positive work in investment climate reform. And all of those will only go to encourage the inflow, greater inflow of foreign investment into the country. But having said that, much of the 84% of the money that has come in, the capital that have come in, are portfolio investment, which, as you have mentioned, is volatile. It could disappear by a twinkle of an eye. It's all on sentiment. But it's still founded on the macroeconomic stability of the country and the fact that there's investor confidence in the country. What we need to encourage more is the foreign direct investment. Unfortunately, it's very small. It's only about $243 million. That's the one that we want to see happening in billions of dollars, because they have a longer term view of your economy, and they diffuse into productive capacity sectors and support, a lot of them go into equity and they support incipient growth in the economy. So we need to see more of that. But we also need to interrogate the data that are already available by disaggregating this and then knowing where policy would go and see who flow. If you look at the channel through which this money is coming, the majority of them are from the South African banks. Stanbic Bank, Standard Bank, and Rand Bank. And if you look at the source of the money coming in, yes, UK is about $4.5 billion of that, US $1.5 billion of that. South Africa, surprisingly, number 3, with over $765 million. Then before you have UAE. So over 80% of these investments are coming from these 4 countries. So when South Africa is aging up, and then the South African banks are the ones carrying over 80% channeling this resource, that means talk more to South Africa. So don't forget, some players in Nigeria are South African companies. You have the DSTV, you have ShopRite, you have Pack and Shop. Quite a few of them coming in. So they represent a significant source of influx despite the challenges we have about the xenophobia in South Africa. We need to build and strengthen relationship there because they're a good source. But if you also look at the destination of the investment, 80% of them are heading to Lagos and Abuja, which tells you they are more on the capital market side of things. Very little go to the States.
Indeed, Prof, you said it all, but the FDIs are something to worry about, and you're correct. It's only accounted for about 2.86% of the sum total. And what does this say about investors' confidence in Nigeria and the country as, investment destination? Plus, let's talk about the UK emerging as the top source of capital investment in the country as well. Were you surprised considering the presence of China?
No, not really. I think we're not comparing like to like as such. But you see, when you look at if you disaggregate the profile in greater detail, looking at the sectors, they are still all majority financial. You look at shares, about 3.4 billion went to shares. The banking sector, about 2.8 billion. And then you have the financing, like the bonds and all that. This is about 2.1 billion. And servicing and manufacturing and production, those ones are 400, and agri is meager one. The monies are going into all these investments. That's why you say 84% are portfolio investment. Of course, we need more from China. And I think we need to take China far more seriously than we have taken them at the moment. I look towards a bold $100 billion program Nigerian government will take to China and say, look, we want to trade seriously with you. Come into our export-free zones. There are 34 of those. We are clamping down on some of these spurious imports into our country that are being dumped or being smuggled. And we want to do business with you. But get these your guys to escape this 25% duty and tariff President Trump is slamping on you, and come and use us as a base to manufacture for re-export to America. Go. This is the kind of message we need to take to them with a big plan, so that big investments can look into it, not rather than just meandering among African countries and getting bits and pieces and shares. We need to take a bold plan, and they will buy into it because we are the biggest economy in Africa.
Okay. Prof, I've got 2 questions for you. Number one, I'm excited you looked at remittances, about 23, 25 billion. That's safe to say, and that's even more than, that's almost competing with crude oil revenue in this country. So that's safe to say that Nigeria is basically run by, the people power. It's a people-based country. One other question is, how easy are we going to make that remittance money to be able to come in? Because it looks like it's a sure banker. It never depletes over the year. But secondly, you're saying we should go to bed with China. It's good. It's good rhetoric. But you want to remember what China has done to countries like Zimbabwe? Countries like Zambia that has gone to bed with China? It's so bad because Zambia can't pay back their debt now that China, some newspapers are printed in Chinese in Zambia. The airport in Zambia, because Zambia can't pay back their debt, is taken over by the Chinese. It is safe to say that China practically runs the country of Zambia, which is a sovereign country, because of debt burden. And still the same, you're saying we should go to bed with China?
No, let me explain. There are 2 things there. You borrow money as external borrowing to build your infrastructure and build all that. Obviously, you have to take head on the issue of debt sustainability and then make sure you address that. And in the case of Nigeria, debt sustainability is tied to revenue generation. So what we have is revenue generation crisis, not debt crisis, because we have substantial headroom on external debt, which is 40%. We're on 21.5. Now, the second thing, the real thing that I'm talking about is joint venture. Joint venture, they will bring their money, they will bring their technology, they will bring their products, export-free zones, and make those. But they will rely a lot on our labor. They will rely a lot on our raw materials because we have presidential directive on 10 product, value chains. We focus on those. So in those industrial joint ventures with them, we are not owing them. They are investors in our country, but it's kind of offshore investment. So we are playing with them. They are adding value to our value chains. They are exporting them to China, to America. They are also assembling some of the things like vehicles and things that they are re-exporting to China and then exporting to 500 million in West Africa, ECOWAS, and then the 1.2 billion across Africa. So that's a huge market. And on the other hand, Nigeria guarantees them 40% of what they manufacture will be absorbed in Nigeria. You know, obviously we have a trade local, buy local, buy made in Nigeria. So we've got all that. And presidential initiative and order are backing this method of doing business. That is where I say we should put our eggs on. Then coming to the diaspora remittance, it never ceases to amaze me why a country like ours could not strategize in great depth on what to do about leveraging the diaspora investment. This is not manna from heaven. These are our own boys and girls that have gone abroad, nearly 10 million of those all over the countries, and they are sending money back. If you have strategic programs engaging them, leveraging housing, because there are certain priority areas where they are interested in. Housing, who doesn't want to have a home in Abuja, have a home in Oyo, in Ibadan. And so,
sorry to interrupt your thoughts. We'll be right back to discuss some more after this break. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the Morning Show here on the Rise News. It's the last lap, and we still have from our Abuja studios Professor Ken Ife talking about the latest figures from the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics about Nigeria's capital inflows. Professor, before we went on that break, you were talking about structuring remittances, foreign remittances into the country. But let's talk about policy direction. We have seen what the CBN governor is striving to achieve for the next 5 years: financial system stability, financial inclusion, targeted development. But on the fiscal side, do you get any sense that, there will be a complementary agenda? Is there a policy direction as we await the cabinet to be announced? What sort of fiscal policy should we be looking forward to complement what the CBN governor is striving to achieve for the next 5 years?
Well, the CBN governor in his plan has outlined exactly the things you have just mentioned, which are to achieve more financial inclusion and support more systemic stability in the financial sector and all of that. But CBN is also stronger on the intervention in the real sector, where you have seen results. You've had the presidential directives on 10 value chains, which they are tackling. And then also they're even going for the smugglers and the importers and dumpers of goods in Nigeria. They're going for them, which means enforcement. And then on the other hand, you also have a presidential order 3 that is saying, please buy local, support those. And it's really very, very good articulation of policy. I like that. Then on the other hand, you are saying, what about the fiscal response? Now, fiscal response has always been an issue in Nigeria. In 2015, when the banks stood alone to fight the complete wipeout of many sectors of our economy, we were struggling to get a fiscal response. But obviously, there are many explanations for that. But we do need to have our fiscal authorities up the game. But they are trying. If you look at FIRS, it's widening the base tax net from 20 million to 35 million entities in 1 year and then growing more. And then we also need to see more support from, like some of those, I mentioned some of the export-free zones and some of those priorities. When you identify sectors you prioritize, you also come and meet them with fiscal incentives. And then also, if you are saying you are going to block any import of, or what you call subsidy or dumping of, dumping of these goods, you also have to raise the tariff lines on those. If you can't raise it because we are a member of the CET in ECOWAS, you use levy instrument to bump up the effective duty. And so that when you do get them through, you collect good money from them and discourage them. And at least send a strong signal that we are all singing from the same hymn book. So there are areas, and even in revenue collection too, we need to get more action on using the Federal Fiscal Responsibility Commission to get operating surplus. 80% of the money collected by 122 MDAs should be lodged in the coffers every month, not wait until 1 year when you have written down the money and then you give us creative accounting. So all of those will beef the revenue available to the government, make government borrow less, and then have less resort to domestic borrowing. The domestic borrowing is the biggest killer. It crowds out private sector investment. It's very high, 15 to 18%, very, very high. Even when you go to foreign investment, foreign borrowing, the bonds are equally high at 7.8%. 8% is high. We switch more to development assistance, development banks like World Bank, because those could be as low as 1%, 2% over 40 years, 10-year moratorium. So in that way, you're restructuring the debt, more in favor of those capital-oriented. So there are things that we could do on the fiscal side to support the monetary policy stance, so that the correct signals are being sent to investors and even to the domestic investors. You don't ignore them, because people who have facilities, it's easier for them to expand them to other states to take advantage of the fiscal incentive than to have fresh people take a fresh look.
Okay, Professor. As we start to wind things down, what effect will the AfCFTA make as regards all of this? I mean, the president will be signing this over the weekend in Niger. What effect will it make as regards, increasing the revenue inflow into Nigeria? Since it's open market, open border, there's more trade, more transaction. Do you want to have any likely predictions? Are there any empirical work being done? Actually,
okay, the free movement, first of all, there are 3 levels. Africa Continental Free Trade, there is only level 1, which is a common market, free trade area, common market. There are level 2s and there are level 3s. Level 2 is the customs union, level 3 is monetary union and all that. So ECOWAS is far ahead of those. And after doing this accession, after entering the AfCFTA, then the next stage will be by accession. For example, those in Africa who want to accede, they will have to accede to our CET, and then they will accede to our. So all those ones will be by accession. So it's good to be in it, because we cannot be leading ECOWAS, putting over 65% of funding for ECOWAS, and actually #1 financier of African Union and NEPAD, and then we are nowhere to be found. So it's a good decision. But there are so much risks, which is why I respect the process that we went through. You have to fully consult all the players. You can't take them for granted. So that's very good, but we've now made the decision to move forward. Now, the advantage is this. If you look at the analysis of the capital importation, you see Zambia, you see Botswana, you see so many African countries pouring in a lot of money into Nigeria, and you're asking why. Over almost 800 million from South Africa. So what you find is that there will be, because the free movement of goods and services and right of establishment and capital are all part of the AfCFTA. They're all in there. So there will be more momentum, more impact. And then what also happens is that there's more protection, investment protection for these other African countries coming in, because we are part of the AfCFTA. So, and then also there are dispute resolution mechanisms, which are not available at the moment in the ECOWAS framework. I did the work on it in 2008 and recommended that, and it hasn't been implemented. But it is now built into this. So what it means is that there's an opportunity for trade disputes to go somewhere. We're having the issue with Ghana, and there's nowhere to go. You go to the ECOWAS Court of Justice, they say they don't have any jurisdiction on economic matters. You see the problem on human rights issues. So but in ab initio here in the AfCFTA, we have dispute resolution mechanisms. So it's very, very important, critically important. So what we now have to do, now you can see the propensities you see the propensities for investment to flow from some quarters, you now target them. Do more study on what is it that, how will you accelerate the tempo? To be honest with you, Nigeria is just, despite all our problems, investors still love to come to Nigeria. Not least because you have aggressive, okay, look at the banks. The banks are virtually in every African country, Nigerian banks. You see the multinationals, African multinationals like Dangote, it's in most of the countries. You see the oil and gas investments all over Africa. Nigerians are involved in those. So there are things that we have to give, and there are things we have to take. They want our market, and they want our big products. So there are things that we have to sell.
Indeed. And initially, you talked about sending out the right signals. And as we are trying to woo these investors, on the other hand, you have the threat of shutting down bank accounts of companies and friends of those who are flouting the FX restriction to those banned 43 items. Is that the right direction to go? I guess my question here is that of due process and body language to these investors we're trying to woo. Very quickly before we go.
No, if Nigeria is aggressive and recalcitrant, we would have shut down MTN. We wouldn't have even given them all the time that they needed because they've been caught red-handed. But we still went the way of democracy and diplomacy, and they managed their debt, stuff like that. You know, Nigeria is not that bad, please. What we have done is we are protecting the health of our nation. When people dump goods here, they are dumping substandard goods that are injurious to our health. We have to fight that. And the WTO rules allows us to do that. Now, if people are dumping for commercial reasons, it means that some foreign countries are subsidizing co-products to enter into Nigeria in perfect competition. You know, so we have to defend our economy. You have to defend our manufacturing basis. We have to defend the infant industry. Every country is entitled to infant industry protection. You cannot take 10 value chains, go in there and do these poor billions, hundreds of billions, and build industry, and then you don't have any protection for them. It doesn't happen. Even America, anybody that hasn't
Okay,
protect them.
I definitely know that we have a lot to talk about concerning this as regards the 3 stages of, you know, the AfCFTA. The last stage, monetary stage, is also very an exciting stage because that will lead to Africa having, you know, its own, you know, general currency and things like that. But I would like to say a very big thank you to you, and that's our show for you today. I'm Rafal Hosseini.
I'm Adesoa Omoruan.